Attorney General on Lateline last night. Joining us now from Sydney is the Assistant Treasurer Josh Frydenberg. Josh Frydenberg, good morning to you.
Good morning to you, Michael.
Why isn't Dyson Heydon's position untenable?
Well, in the correspondence that's been cited by George Brandis between Dyson Heydon and his office, as well as the organisers of the event, it's been very clear now that if it was to be a designated Liberal Party event, then it would be inappropriate for the Royal Commissioner to attend. Now, Dyson Heydon is someone who's been on the High Court bench for a decade. He's been Dean of the Sydney University Law School. He's someone of the highest integrity, and the Labor Party was always going to attack the umpire because of the troubling revelations out of the Royal Commission about secret deals between unions that shortchanged workers and that saw Bill Shorten's credibility as a witness be questioned. And that is why the Labor Party is now seeking to undermine the integrity of the Commissioner and the Commission itself.
That correspondence you referred to, released by the Commissioner himself, implies that Dyson Heydon did know that this was going to be organised under the auspices of the Liberal Party lawyers' professional branch.
But it makes it very clear that A, it's not a fundraiser, and B, that there would be no Liberal Party logo attributed to his lecture.
But excuse me for interrupting, it's a Liberal Party event.
But it's quite clear that now Dyson Heydon has pulled out of this event because he understands that it would be inappropriate for him to attend. But this is a distinguished jurist who's speaking at a lecture that's been given by other distinguished jurists and attorney generals. It's not a fundraiser. And it's very clear that the Labor Party is politicking when it comes to the credibility of the Royal Commissioner.
It was a Liberal Party event, and the Justice did agree to attend that event. Why did he do that in your view?
Well, he's not attending the event.
No, that wasn't the question. Why would he agree to do that in the first place? We know he's pulled out.
Well, that's a question you may have to ask him.
Does it raise questions about his judgment?
Well, I think his judgment's been very clear in a decade on the bench and in his distinguished legal career, and this is a very important Royal Commission. There's been very troubling revelations about union activity and corruption. Bill Shorten's been called twice before the Royal Commission. He hasn't given sufficient answers, and that's why the Labor Party is now attacking the man.
Do you fear, though, that this, from the government's perspective, will taint any findings that the Royal Commission does make against people like Bill Shorten?
No, I don't, because I can't preempt what the findings will be of this Royal Commission, but it's been a long, serious inquiry into systemic issues in the building and construction area and involving inappropriate workplace relations activities. Now, the Australian people understand when you get a High Court judge overseeing a formal inquiry such as this, and we've seen the revelations that have already come out, that there will of course be some very serious findings at the end of it, and I'm sure we'll all take it at face value.
So the government intends sticking by Dyson Heydon as the Commissioner?
Absolutely, Michael.
Is this another distraction, Josh Frydenberg, the government could simply have done without this week?
Of course. I mean, I think we want to get back to bread and butter issues, which is jobs and economic growth, and passing through the China-Australia Free Trade Agreement, which will set us up for a stronger economic partnership with our biggest trading partner. But we did some good things this week in the Parliament. We passed the Medical Research Future Fund legislation. We introduced legislation to make Australia a founding member of the Asian Development Infrastructure Bank. I introduced legislation to reverse Labor's unfair unclaimed monies regime. So there were important things, and of course the climate change agreement and target that we'll take to Paris was announced, which I think is also very significant.
The government also had that marathon 6-hour meeting to discuss the same-sex marriage issue, and of course there are conflicting versions now from different ministers as to where to go forward from here, including Scott Morrison and George Brandis, as you know, very publicly at loggerheads over whether any people's vote should be a referendum or a plebiscite. Which should it be?
Well, my preference is for a plebiscite, but they're two different types of legal change, and of course what George Brandis was saying was right, that you do not need a referendum to change the Constitution in order to enable the Parliament to make a change in relation to gay marriage. The High Court made that very clear just 2 years ago. But what Scott Morrison was pointing out is that a referendum is a binding a binding decision as opposed to a plebiscite, which is indicative of community attitudes. And as well as that, a referendum is a mandatory vote, whereas a plebiscite is a voluntary one. So they're two different instruments, I suppose, to advance this issue forward on marriage equality.
Can you understand, though, voters looking on all of this, Josh Frydenberg, scratching their heads at why the government can't come up with a simple message on this very simple issue, referendum or plebiscite?
I actually think the opposite, Michael, that you'll find that the Australian public will appreciate the opportunity to express their own opinion on this very fundamental, important issue. Now, it's no secret where I've been on the issue of marriage equality, and I made my views known in the party room, but we had a 6-hour meeting. It was very respectful. So many of my colleagues spoke, but it was clear from the speakers in the room that there wasn't the support to have a free vote or to change the party's position this term. And when the Prime Minister summed up the mood of the meeting, he indicated a way forward, which was that in the next session of Parliament, the next term of Parliament, that there wouldn't be a binding position for party members, and that a way forward was a plebiscite or a referendum. Now, that's still to be worked out by the Cabinet, by the leadership, by the party room, but I think what has happened this week is that a very difficult issue has been discussed in a respectful way, where people come to the issue, Michael, from different perspectives, be they religious, issues of morality, or their own personal experience. And I think that's been a very healthy and in fact a cathartic maybe experience for the Liberal Party this week.
What do you make of your colleague Liberal Minister Christopher Pyne's bid to exclude National Party MPs from that very long joint party room meeting?
Well, Chris Pyne made it very clear that he thought it was an issue that should be dealt with by the Liberal Party room. It was decided that it would be a joint party room discussion. I think that was an important discussion, and all my colleagues have a right to express their views as they did.
What does that do for coalition harmony, though?
Well, as I said, I think we've now dealt with this issue. We've got a pathway forward.
There's a lot of bad blood amongst National Party MPs about that move by Christopher Pyne.
Well, you'd have to ask them, but as far as I'm concerned, and speaking to my National Party colleagues, they want the same as my Liberal Party colleagues, which is to get back to the key issues affecting the Australian people, jobs and growth, and how we can set Australia up for future prosperity. And they're the bread and butter issues that the Australian people are interested in.
Josh Frydenberg, you say you're a supporter of same-sex marriage. You're also a supporter of free vote. Should that private members' bill on the subject be brought to a vote?
Well, as the Prime Minister has made very clear, this private members' bill will be treated as previous ones, and that's a question that will be answered next week, I'm sure.
If it came to a vote, would you cross the floor?
No, I wouldn't cross the floor.
Why not?
Because I'm a member of the executive, and as I said, I expressed my views both privately and publicly to my colleagues. I was in the minority. I respect the fact that we have now taken a party decision. We've now got a pathway for moving forward, and let's deal with it that way, but I won't be crossing the floor.
On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate this week for the government?
Well, if you look at the position that we took on climate change, where our target is 26 to 28%, a very credible target in terms of emissions reductions by 2030, and a 50% reductions per capita by 2030, which will be the highest from anywhere in the world. I think that's a very significant achievement. I think on the issue of gay marriage, while of course there were some passions and differing views expressed, I think we have now resolved that issue. We've selected a new speaker, and that was a smooth transition. As I said, we've introduced important legislation into the Parliament. So I actually think it's been a good week. Now, next week, we'll get on with the job of talking about the issues that matter most to the Australian people, namely jobs and growth.
You're going to give yourself a rating? 7, 8, 3, 4, 5?
I'll leave that to the voters at the next election, Michael.
Okay, Josh Frydenberg in Sydney, thank you very much for your time this morning.
Nice to be with you.
Let's turn to the other